Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. In soybeans, we're always looking at ways we can increase yield or protect yield. Well, certainly insects and diseases can rob yield. And when we get to that full bloom, first pod stage of growth, we like to use fungicide and insecticide. We'll talk about how exactly to do that and which products may work best for you.
One of the other things we're going to cover today is how do you manage sodic soils? We're seeing what we believe is even an increase in the amount of sodic soils in the United States, and there absolutely is a way that you can solve that problem. It's not going to happen overnight, but you definitely can solve it. We're going to talk about that today.
We've got a tough to control weed of the week, but first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about a phenomenon that happens not every single year in every area of the country, but it does happen quite often. We see what we would call yellow tops in corn plants.
Well, this leads to so many questions because if a whole field lights up, well, then it's pretty easy to say, wow, what's going on with that field? But when we see one plant here and then 99 plants that look great and then one more plant that's yellow, it's like, why is the top of this plant yellow and not the 100 plants around it? It is kind of puzzling.
So what some people will say is, oh, it's fast growth syndrome in corn. Well, let me just tell you this, there's no such thing. There's not a fast growth syndrome in corn, but there is such a thing as a nutrient deficiency. And this is typically what we're seeing. So what we encourage you to do, if you have this problem in your operation, we want you to go out and do plant tissue analysis on those plants that have yellow tops, and then take the very best plants in your field and maybe sample some of those separately. What you're most likely going to find is it's a zinc deficiency, a sulfur deficiency, maybe a manganese deficiency. It's one of those micronutrients, or like sulfur, a secondary nutrient, where it's non-mobile in the plant. So if the plant is at a rapid growth stage and it doesn't have enough nutrients it's pulling out with its roots, it can't rob it from some other area of the plant like it can with NP or K. It just is going to be short for a while, and your plant's going to be yellow for a while.
Well, sometimes I'll have farmers say, what is this yellow top syndrome going on? And I say, well, hey, did you happen to notice the yellow bottom syndrome? And they'll say, what are you talking about, yellow bottom syndrome? I'll say, exactly. The only reason that people are really talking about this and noticing it is it's at the top of the plant. If we had a nutrient deficiency happening at the bottom of the plant and it was happening one every so many plants, well, nobody would notice because it's at the bottom of the plant. We can't see it from the end of the field. We can't see it from the road. Walk your fields this summer. Even your fields that look great. Look at the lower leaves on the plant as well. Chances are you're going to see some potassium deficiency, some nitrogen deficiency, or some other problem at the bottom of the plant too, happening on one plant, then not for a few other plants, and then again.
Okay, so the real question is, why is this happening to 1 out of 100 plants or 1 out of 20 plants? Well, part of it is just the fact that, especially when we talk about micronutrients like zinc and boron and manganese, all these different micronutrients, how much are you putting across an entire acre? Not very much. So if, let's say, you were doing it with dry, or for that matter even liquid, are you properly getting that coverage that you should have? I mean, is really every single root of every single plant going to absorb some zinc or some boron or some manganese or some sulfur? Probably not. So that's a big thing. The other thing is, just like, for example, Darren and I, our brothers, we look a little bit different, don't we? So we probably absorb nutrients a little bit different. The same thing's going to happen to your corn plants out there. We just call corn corn, but you know what? Even the same variety, it has the same parents, but not every single plant is exactly the same.
The other thing that I would point out is this. A lot of times our plants are short of nutrients way before they start showing the symptomology on the leaves. So one plant may be already showing the symptoms on the leaves. The plant right next to it may be just about as short in that nutrient as the one that's showing it. So don't just assume, well, there's only 1 out of 100 plants that's struggling, so I don't need to worry about it in my field. No, chances are out of those 100 plants, there's probably 90 of them that are struggling. Just one of them happens to be showing it externally.
The number one thing we want you to understand about this is there is no such thing as fast growth syndrome in corn, and don't let people tell you, oh, it's just going to grow out of it on its own. Yeah, it will, but in the meantime, you've already lost yield. Figure out what the real problem is with tissue analysis, and then make some changes to your fertility program next year so you don't see this happening again in the future and hurting your yield.
One other thing we don't want to see out in your fields is our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
Regalia RX biofungicide activates a plant's natural defense system, limiting the effects of disease and improving overall plant health. Regalia RX complements your fungicide program to optimize yield and strengthen return on investment. Ask your retailer for Regalia RX today.
Wake up, breakfast is served. Your roots crave P. Most of your applied P gets tied up in the soil, a natural phenomenon known as phosphorus fixation. Fix the problem with Avail Phosphorus Fertilizer Enhancer. Avail makes more P available to your roots, here, here, and here. Increasing P availability can lead to increased P uptake in the plant. That's more P, and more P. More phosphorus for your crop can mean more results in your bin. An average of 9.6 bushels per acre of corn. Breakfast is served. Supercharge your P with Avail.
It's a humble idea. Use a biological process to turn a plant into a power source. From that idea came the first Poet refinery. One biorefinery in one town turned into 27 facilities in 27 towns, creating new local jobs, producing hundreds of millions of gallons of ethanol, and providing renewable products around the world. Suddenly, that one little idea seems a whole lot bigger. See the world differently with Poet.
How will you secure your farm for the future? The Quasar Chopping Cornhead from Capello USA will help. Our design is focused on efficiency, longevity, and reducing harvest loss, making the Quasar the corn harvest solution to bring your farm forward. With hundreds of units ready for immediate delivery, secure your farm's future today. Do it for your farm, do it for them. Order now. Capello USA. Italian craftsmanship, American grit.
What if instead of running test plots on 10 acres, you could test on 10,000? With Farmers Business Network, the world becomes your plot trial. FBN is the independent farmer-to-farmer agronomic network. FBN connects real data from tens of thousands of fields and provides you trusted analysis on hundreds of seeds, practices, and field performance to maximize your profits. Find out how your field seeds and practices compare today by joining the FBN community at farmersbusinessnetwork.com. Just $500 per year for unlimited acres.
Your time is valuable. That's why you need a Hagie STS application system. Hagie STS products are designed for precision and efficiency, allowing you to make applications all season long with just one machine. Contact your Hagie rep today.
One of the practices many farmers do in soybeans at that full flower first pod stage is to treat with both a fungicide and an insecticide.
Well, we always get the question, will a fungicide plus insecticide application pay for me? That's a tough one to answer. We don't know what the weather conditions are, what kind of insect pressure or disease pressure you have. But I will say this. If we have some insects out there, but not some disease, using a combination, well, you'll probably see a return on investment. If we have some disease out there, but not a huge amount of insects, you may see a return on investment. So you just don't know. And many people look at it as, well, I have some bugs, and I've certainly got risk of disease, and I have to be preventative with that disease application. I'm already out spraying for bugs. A fungicide application has historically paid. It's just one of those decisions that you're making on the farm.
Okay, so let's get a little more specific here. Number one, we don't want you spraying for bugs if you don't have bugs. So if you see absolutely zero bugs in the field, then we would tell you there's really no point in spraying an insecticide. Okay, we're not big on spraying preventative insecticides, and not too many people are. But in most cases, you're gonna find bugs out in your field. So when you're out there, you just have to determine, hey, do I have an economic threshold? And keep in mind, for a lot of these insecticides, they cost $2 an acre now for the full rate, $2. This is one of the best things that's happened here in the last 10 years on the farm. Even while commodity prices were going up starting 10 years ago, insecticide prices were going down. I mean, most everything else, as you know, on the farm for costs went up. Everything, it seemed like, went up, but insecticides came crashing down. So when we have $2 for the full rate of an insecticide, it only takes a few bugs. So don't let people tell you, oh, it's 250 aphid is the threshold number. That's ridiculous. Come on. I mean, the price of insecticide is 1/4 what it was when the 250 aphid threshold came out. So you only need a few aphids in your field. You only need a few bean leaf beetles, a few grasshoppers, a few cutworms. You only have to have a few bugs. So look at that first. Then, if you do have some bugs, you got to realize, hey, every time a bug feeds on a plant, it opens it up for disease. So you are much more likely to have that fungicide pay.
I have two other things here on the bugs, Brian. One, when you're out with a sweep net in your field, which we strongly encourage you, have a sweep net and use it on a regular basis in all your fields. I don't care if it's soybeans or corn or wheat or whatever crop you're looking at, and just sweep through the field and see what you find, because chances are you're not just finding soybean aphids, you've also got some grasshoppers or some bean leaf beetles. So don't just look at one threshold, look at, all right, I've got 5 different species of bugs out here. They're all at about 80% of what a threshold would be. Guess what? You definitely need to be spraying. Then the other thing is, not only do bugs open up wounds where disease can get in, some bugs carry that disease with them. Like bean leaf beetles, for example, with bean pod mottle virus. When they're feeding on that plant, they're actually injecting some of that toxin into the plant, and they're going to have a disease issue. So we definitely want to, when we're out spraying for bugs, also think about disease too.
Okay, so the next thing is, what else can I throw in that tank? I've already got a fungicide and an insecticide in there. Can I throw a herbicide in? Yes, you can. Can I throw a foliar fertilizer in there? Yes, you can. But when you start mixing all these things together, you have to be real careful about 2 things. Number 1 is, will it mix? So we always tell people, have some compatibility agent around on the farm, because if you start having an issue, throw the compatibility agent in. That hopefully will get you by. The next thing is, with the leaf burn, you have to be really careful there. Like Lorsban or the old organophosphates, for example, you throw that in, they have some harsher oils in that formulation, and that's going to add to your leaf burn. So we don't typically like seeing foliar fertilizer together with Lorsban, but foliar fertilizer together with one of the pyrethroids, not so bad. So just talk to your agronomist, and when you start putting all these different tank mix things together, you got to make sure you're doing the right thing for spray adjuvants and just for general mixing, so you don't have any issues out on your farm.
Okay, let's talk about timing really quick, because if you've got bugs, you have to spray, and spray on the early side. The highest yielding farmers around the country, that's their rule of thumb. If I've got bugs, I would rather err on the early side than be too late and let them cause a whole bunch more damage. The other thing is, okay, let's say that you have an insect population that's building, like soybean aphids, and you have ideal weather coming up for the next week where that aphid population is going to blow up really fast. Get spraying now, and if you say, hey, I'm right at the perfect time for fungicide, which in most areas, R2 to R3, full bloom to first pod, that's the right time to be spraying a fungicide where we're getting the best economic return on our investment year in, year out. At that timing, take a look for bugs. If you have a population that's growing, pull the trigger on the early side.
When we talk about spraying on the early side for aphids, Transform is a good product for you too. It's more expensive. That's going to be about $6 an acre roughly, but it doesn't kill lady beetles. So if you were spraying way early and you say, ooh, I'm worried about getting a second flush, well, hey, if you don't kill the beneficials, then maybe you're able to get by without having to spray a second time.
As we get to these stages during reproduction in soybeans, we get to R2, full bloom, we get to R3, first pod. They're very critical stages of growth. A fungicide application has shown a good return on investment across the country, and also at that time, make sure you're scouting for insects. If you've got some bug issues out there, you'll want to address those as well.
Well, another thing you may want to address when you're out in the field spraying is our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to stop it on your farm coming up later in the show.
Take a look inside any rotary combine, and you'll find single rotor technology. Technology Case IH introduced over 35 years ago with the axial flow combine. But unless it gives you more bells and whistles with fewer belts and chains, more power using less fuel, it's not an axial flow. Because while the heart of every rotary combine beats red, only Case IH gives you the power to do more.
Working in agriculture over the past 3 decades, I saw a need for an accurate way to apply dry product to seed. That's where our Changing Times applicators come in. The CT applicator brush sifts powder into small particles, resulting in proper distribution. Quantities can be adjusted by the speed of the brush rotation. This allows for even and accurate distribution of product. Application at the time of planting can be used with any seed delivery system and saves farmers time, labor, and money. Remember, CT applicators for the Changing Times.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
I wish I could side dress more than just nitrogen.
You can.
While side dressing is efficient for nitrogen applications, you can also use that opportunity to apply PK and the micronutrients your crop needs. AgroLiquid's Calibrate and MicroLink products allow you to nutritionally balance your side dress application efficiently and economically. Let agriculture liquid fertilizer help you make your next crop a bumper crop. For more info, visit agroliquid.com.
This year's projected U.S. soybean yield will lose over $500 million per point in shrink. Eliminate shrink in your bin. Store grain without lowering moisture content with the AgriDry Bullseye Temperature and Moisture Controller. The Bullseye monitors air temperature and relative humidity, allowing your fans to utilize the weather's natural condition to maintain your grain at market moisture. Fan run times drastically decrease along with the cost of over-drying. Eliminate shrink today. Call now.
One of the most challenging issues a farmer can have in his fields is when he has what's called sodic soil. With sodic soil, that means there's too much sodium in the field, and quite often then, as an effect of this high sodium, the soil pH is really high, there's a lot of soil crusting, just major challenges. We're going to talk today about how to fix that sodic soil.
One of the big challenges about having too much sodium, or you could look at it as too much salt out in your field, is we want to get that salt to flush through the soil. But when you have such a high percentage of sodium in the top part of the soil, that really seals the soil up and doesn't let water infiltrate through. If we can't get water to flush through, it's really difficult to flush any salt out of that soil.
All right, but we got to start with what's the root cause of the problem? Well, the whole cause of this issue was poor drainage. Now, a lot of people will tell you, oh, tile isn't going to work in sodic soil. That's ridiculous. Put some tile in the ground, and you're not going to be able to most likely get by with 70-foot spacings or 100-foot spacings. You might need 20 or 30-foot spacings. And I know this is going to mean some investment, but let's look at how much land is selling for today, and let's look at how productive that sodic soil is today. Okay, you've got a lot of dollars tied up in something that's producing nothing. So what we're talking about here is investing some money for the super long term. When you tile, we're talking a 50 or 70-year investment. Okay, so that's a great thing. You put that tile in the ground, now we've got something that, hey, long term, we're going to start fixing the problem, because we want to turn that sodium into a salt. And when we do, keep in mind, salts are leachable. They'll flush out through that drainage system. And yeah, it's going to take time to get this done, but you got to get started with the first step, and the first step is tiling. The number one thing I guess that we want to tell you today is don't just say, oh, that area of the field is just no good and there's nothing I can ever do about it. There absolutely is, but it's going to take some work most likely. You've got to get some tile in the ground, and in every single area of the country you can tile. So there's no excuse for saying, oh, in our area it doesn't work, or in our area we can't tile. Every single area of the country can tile. You are legally allowed to tile your land. Okay, that's perfectly legal, nothing wrong, you can do it. So yes, you might have to work with a bunch of neighbors, you might have to work with highway departments, you got to figure something out. But once you get that tiling in, you get some calcium out there somehow, some way, possibly some sulfur, you start raising some barley, you get some more organic matter in there. After 10, 15 years, pretty soon you've got that back to pretty normal, productive ground.
And it's good to have ground where a crop will grow, but unfortunately many times that means weeds will grow there too. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Farming isn't just in the land, it's in you. Take control of weeds like never before. Enlist builds on the Roundup Ready system, combining proven control of a new 2,4-D and glyphosate in Enlist Duo herbicide. Protect what matters without changing the way you farm. Talk to your seed or crop protection supplier today.
Our Weed of the Week today is okra. Now, for those of you who like to eat okra, you're saying, what? How could that be
I
a
was
weed?
going to say, I can control some okra right now. That'd be no problem.
Yeah. But I mean, it's the same thing how we talk about volunteer corn is a weed. Volunteer soybeans can be a weed. Volunteer wheat can be a weed. So anything can be a weed when it's somewhere you don't want it to be. So today we'll talk a little about how to control okra if you have it on your farm.
All right, so if you're raising okra for a crop, for example, and you've got a little bit that went to seed again and you're planting the next crop out there, you do want to get it under control. And certainly you could use some tillage in this as well. We hear many times, hey, you're always talking about the herbicide options. What about cultural practices? Well, certainly if you do tillage, if you plant a narrower row spacing and get a good early start with your crop so you get a crop canopy earlier, that's going to help you with okra or any weed that you're trying to control. But when it comes to herbicide options, that's usually important because all of a sudden something pops up that you weren't expecting. Oh man, my soybeans are popping up, now I've got some okra, or my corn is popping up, now I've got some okra, what can I do?
Okay, well, one of the things is if you're raising okra, there are some people who've tried mesotrione or one of the HPPDs. Even famesifin hasn't really hurt that okra as much as we would think it might. That'd be Flexstar.
We're not recommending that you apply those products
right.
on the okra, but just saying that they haven't killed it.
And the whole thing is we start to get limited because some of the herbicides we very commonly use in corn and soybean production, they're just not going to be real great. So the top things that we would say is, hey, Roundup crops, we have Roundup. Liberty crops, we have Liberty. And in corn and several other crops, like wheat, for example, we can use Buctril. Well, all of those are really good. Buctril especially we like to talk about because that can be used in conventional crops, conventional corn, it can be used in wheat, and Buctril is very good at controlling okra.
All right, so you said Buctril, Liberty, Roundup. 3 products that need completely different recommendations made in terms of how you're going to apply them. So you look at Roundup, and many times we're looking for lower gallons. Maybe it's 10 gallons an acre at the most, or it could be a little bit lower depending on what stage of growth things are at. We're looking for low gallons. We're looking generally for lower pressure and bigger droplets to try and avoid the drift. However, it's completely different when you look at Buctril and Liberty. Both those products need excellent coverage in order for us to kill those weeds. With Liberty, many times you'll hear if I've got thick weed pressure, if I've got big crop, I may need to go up to 20 gallons of water and very high pressure to get smaller droplets to try to get good push down through the canopy and good coverage on all the leaves. I will caution you though, you can use too much pressure, especially if you've got hot weather and you don't get that small droplet to push all the way down through. You don't want to create a complete fog, otherwise you just aren't going to get coverage down to the bottom of the plant. So with your pressure, it may be somewhere in the 40 to 60 pound range depending on what tips you're using, but ask your agronomist and your spray tip supplier exactly what pressure is going to do the best job for you to get coverage down to the bottom. With Buctril, that's one that we like to see nice warm weather, but not exceptionally hot weather. And again, we like higher gallons, higher pressure to get good coverage.
So once again, okra can be a problem, but just keep in mind Buctril, Roundup, Liberty, those products are quite good in many different crops. Well, that's it for our Weed of the Week, but stay tuned. Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
If you want to boost your high-yielding soybeans to new levels, it may be nitrogen you're running short on. How to apply nitrogen in soybeans late in the year is the subject of today's Iron Talk. First of all, why would you do it? Here are a few givens. Nodules in ideal soil and weather conditions can only produce about 70% of your soybeans' nitrogen needs. Organic matter can release about 20 pounds of nitrogen per percentage of organic matter. Fertilizer sources like MAP and DAP don't contain much nitrogen. Let's take this example. 70 bushel soybeans require the uptake of 305 pounds of nitrogen. Nodules can produce up to 210 pounds. If soil had 2% organic matter, that would give you another 40 pounds of nitrogen. If you applied 100 pounds of MAP to meet most of your phosphorus demand, you'd get about 10 more pounds of nitrogen, but you're still 45 pounds short. The ideal time to apply nitrogen in soybeans is so availability comes in the R3, or first pod stage, or later. Prior to R3, only about 10% of a soybean's nitrogen needs have been met. The challenge is the crop is big now. The answer is a high clearance sprayer or a high clearance spreader. On our farm last year, we used some controlled release urea in strip trials through the spreader. We also looked at some liquid nitrogen with a nitrogen stabilizer in a high clearance sprayer. Once the nitrogen is spread, you need some rain or irrigation water to get it into the soil and up through the roots to feed that high-protein soybean seed. There is some promising yield data out there, especially if you have high-yielding soybeans and low organic matter soils. You may want to consider a nitrogen application late in the season in those situations. We'll see this year if it pays once again. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show. Where do you go to learn something new for your farm? Join us for the Ag PhD Field Day July 30th on the Hefty Family Farm near Baltic, South Dakota. You'll see and learn about new seed traits, brand new crop protection strategies, test drive the latest equipment, irrigation demonstrations, innovative fertilizer products, and more. Randy Dowdy, Dave Hewlett, Steve Albright, and others will have plots on our farm competing against us for top yields. If that's not enough, you can meet and hear from Coach Mike Ditka, Dr. Rob Fraley, and John Ratzenberger. Come to the Ag PhD Field Day July 30th. For details, visit agphd.com.
Dirty work pays. That is if your dirty work includes a Soil Max Gold Digger tile plow. Soil Max tile plows feature zero deflection technology. With the only tile plow factory paired with Ag Leader's IntelliSlope control system, you eliminate the need for grade calculations and lasers. So make your next investment in a Soil Max Gold Digger. Better yield, longer planting and harvest windows, better water management is all yours with Soil Max. Visit soilmax.com.
Could I boost my potential by foliar feeding?
You can. Foliar feeding can correct nutrient deficiencies and sustain your crop through stress. It's a great way to deliver nutrients that your crop lacks to reach its full potential. Research proves it. Applied alone or in combination with your crop protection program, AgroLiquid products assure that when the season presents opportunity, you can boost your crop's yield potential by foliar feeding. For more info, visit agroliquid.com.
What if instead of running test plots on 10 acres, you could test on 10,000? With Farmers Business Network, the world becomes your plot trial. FBN is the independent farmer-to-farmer agronomic network. FBN connects real data from tens of thousands of fields and provides you trusted analysis on hundreds of seeds, practices, and field performance to maximize your profits. Find out how your field seeds and practices compare today by joining the FBN community at farmersbusinessnetwork.com. Just $500 per year for unlimited acres.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots from Monsanto Bioegg is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more, and is applied to the seed so the live microorganisms go right to work enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Get Quick Roots today.
Stop coring your bins with the AgriDry Gravity Grain Spreader. Traditional bin filling systems create uneven concentrations of grain and fine particulates. Uniform grain distribution allows even airflow throughout the entire bin, giving you more control over temperature and moisture content, increasing your grain quality and bottom line. Call us today for more information.
Dry Load Store, 1-855-AGRIDRY.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
On your farm, you need speed and year-round effectiveness in your tillage program. The Quick Till from Norwood Sales allows you to move quickly through your fields, maximizing time and improving yield. Constructed of heavy-duty materials, the Quick Till is ideal for both spring and fall applications, from preparing a healthy seedbed early in the season to breaking up corn residue after harvest. For more information about how a Quick Till can improve fields on your farm, call Norwood Sales today.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but if you're looking for more agronomic information, we invite you to tune in each weekday for the Ag PhD radio show on SiriusXM Channel 80.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD television program, where we'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Only 11.6 cents per dollar spent on food in America goes back to American farmers and agribusinesses. Where does the other 88.4% go, and what really raises food prices? Visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org to find out.